Hey there, Alan Mathews here. Here's a question. What's the difference between practice and exercise? And question number 2, when do you practice and when do you exercise? That's really 2 questions. In this video, I'm going to talk all about practice versus exercise, what the benefits of each are, what the purpose of each are, and how to get more of each in your practice. Let's do it. So to begin with, let's talk about exercise. In general, and we could bicker about the exact definition of exercise, but in general, exercise is something that we do to gain fitness. We do it just to keep our chops up. We go running just to get our heart rate up. The goal is just to do it. And so if we're at a gym and we're exercising, then the goal is to actually sweat. The goal is to get our heart rates up, something like that. Practice, on the other hand, is actually taking some skill and working at it to make that skill better. And there's a vast difference between practice and exercise. And so the question is, when we're playing guitar, what should we be doing? And what's spurring this conversation right now is that I get a lot of questions, and these questions are, how do I get my tremolo evened out and faster? How do I play faster scales? How do I make this piece better in some way? How do I get my arpeggios cleaner? How do I get my hand from not bouncing when I'm playing fast? All these different things. The problem with those questions is that they're assuming that everything is an exercise. And so what we have to do instead is to look at practice, our guitar practice. We call it practice, but it's oftentimes guitar exercise. If we just pick up the guitar and just start playing, and we're really just like charging through some stuff, put in our time, put it away, that's more exercise. That's like going to the gym and getting on a treadmill. But instead, practice would be taking the skills, looking at the individual skills and practicing them in such a way that the goal of them and the focus of the work is to make them better and to get them more ingrained into our subconscious where we just do them automatically and to get them cleaner. And this is a huge mistake that a lot of players make, is mistaking one for the next. So let's talk a little bit about practice, because as you might have guessed, I'm here as a proponent of practice. And less exercise, more practice. So practice on the classical guitar, any kind of form or position or rudimentary fundamental could be looked at as a practice on the guitar. So I&M, alternation for scales in the right hand, we could practice that by doing it to a specific way, in a specific position in a specific form, so that we're actually practicing the fundamentals of the motion themselves. So the point isn't then to just blaze through all my scales. The point is to really focus in on getting I&M absolutely clean and practicing the motions of doing that action, so that then whenever I do go to exercise, which is just blazing through a whole bunch of scales, that I can use that exercise as then kind of a diagnostic tool to see how well I've been training my fundamentals, which is the practice. So they're 2 totally different things. Now, you could look at just about anything in this way. Arpeggios could be one, doing your different arpeggio patterns, finger picking patterns, with really good form, going slowly, really practicing each motion separately so that you can articulate each one. In a piece of music, this would be executing a particular shift, or from this note to this note. Very small pieces saying exactly how is this going to go, then this going to go, then this going to go, so that you can practice exactly what's going to happen. Then when you put it on the metronome, when you put it at tempo, when you start pushing the speed, that becomes more of an exercise to get it actually better, and to test, are my fundamentals holding up under this extra strain? And that's what exercises are for. That's why we add weight to exercise, and then it becomes like bodybuilding, or it becomes more intensive. We start to run faster. We have those fins in swimming to where you actually have to push more water, things like this. We have these tools that enable us to make the exercise harder so that we can test our fundamental abilities. Now, in your practice, ideally, in a perfect world, then you would be spending at least as much time on the fundamentals and the practice as you are on the exercise, because actually they're more important because they scale, whereas the exercises don't. Just to talk a little bit about that, if you don't do the fundamentals, if you don't do the practicing and just do the exercising, what happens is injury. And over time, then we compensate for our weaknesses and our abilities, and we can still get our scales up pretty fast. We can still get that piece of music up, to speed, but it's kind of like a jalopy riding down the road. It's really rough, it's really bumpy, but it happens, right? And then we can say, well, how do I clean it up? And it comes as an afterthought, but it doesn't really work that way. And so instead, the practice is actually more important. I've got a really interesting statistic for you. But first, let me ask if you've ever jogged before, or if you've ever run. I don't really enjoy running. I run when chased. But there are a lot of people. In America, there are about 30 million runners. And there is a staggering statistic about the injury rate among these runners. 80%. It blows my mind, even now, to think about it. In any given year, 80% of runners injure themselves in some way because of their running. And the reason is this, that's a crazy high number. And the reason is, whenever you go to run, whenever you decide, I'm going to start jogging, what do? Do you take a class? Do you get a coach and get a running coach and just start to learn how to exercise the proper fundamentals of running? Or do you just get out there, lace up your shoes, and just go for it? And the answer is, typically we just go for it. And so even very top runners, very few have actually trained how to run. And this is why the injury rate is so incredibly high. The exact same thing happens in our guitar practice. Most of the people who I have spoken with that have guitar-related injuries or focal dystonia, I opened a conversation about that up a while ago, and I've had some great interactions with people. But one of the things that I've noticed is that most of the people who have some issue with focal dystonia or hand injuries, they have played a lot. It's been many years of playing preceding the actual injury. And they said, well, I played for years and now I can't do it anymore. And not to judge, I'm just saying. But my guess is that there was much more focus on exercises and really doing things than there was on the fundamental motions of it. Tremolo especially, I've heard more people get injured after really practicing intensively on tremolo than anything else. So just FYI, if you're really banging out your tremolo, you may want to really slow down and look at your fundamentals, because a lot of people get hurt practicing the tremolo. Who knew? Well, instead of doing it this way, instead of just putting on your running shoes and just heading out the door and just going for it, full bore, instead, ideally, we have to slow down, really figure out, first off, what are the fundamentals? Who am I going to model on this? What am I going to do? How am I going to actually practice this? And then really practice those with patience and diligence without the end goal of, I want to play this piece, or I want my scales at 120, or whatever it happens to be. Instead, take it out and say, I just want to do this one stroke perfectly. Boom. And now I want to do this other stroke absolutely perfectly. Boom. And pay attention to every single nuance and practice getting that better. It's a tricky thing. And do you know why it is a tricky thing? I'm going to tell you why it's a tricky thing. And that's because of this thing that we carry around called ego. And it is the human nature to want to get the prize. And this is in these type of things, in athletics, in anything athletic. And we are athletic. Our hands are incredibly athletic on the classical guitar, more so than most other types of guitar. We do crazy things with our hands. Crazy, crazy things. And physical therapists have job security because of us and because of everybody on the planet, because the human nature is to go for the end result and not the process. And the process is what we have to slow down and focus on, because there really is no other way to get to where you want to go with your playing besides stopping, saying, okay, time out. I've just got to take a break. I've got to really check in on my fundamentals, and I've got to train in such a way as to build those up so solidly that whenever I do go and exercise, then it's like an Italian sports car, completely smooth, completely effortless, and it just hums down the road. So then the question is in your practice, can you actually put aside your ego? And I don't mean ego as a bad word here. We all got them, and they're great, and they enable us to do some great things. But can we put it aside for our guitar practice, or at least a portion of our guitar practice, and actually just dedicate ourselves to slowing down and putting ourselves in the moment and working on the specific actions and the specific movements that will guarantee our safety of our hands, our beautiful playing for years to come, and our overall lifetime trajectory as musicians playing beautiful music? Can we dedicate time to that incrementally every single time we practice, instead of just barreling out there? The time's going to go by anyway. In 5 years, you are still going to be playing guitar, I certainly hope, and you could be at a completely different place than you would be otherwise if you can actually slow down and look at the fundamentals and really model yourself on fundamentals of great motion. So I hope that inspires you to look at your practice in a different way. Please subscribe to this channel. Please go over to Classical Guitar Shed and read more stuff like this and get views on fundamentals and all that kind of good stuff over there. I hope to see you very soon. Take care.